Hi guys, it's Mrs. Melson. Okay, in this video we're going to talk about non-void methods. So these are methods that, let me scroll down here to my void methods, that not only perform a task, okay, but the result is something that I can assign to a variable. So I won't have a void option up here. I'm going to either put string, int, double, or Boolean because I have to tell Java what type of variable I am that's going to come out of the method. Okay, so I'm just going to come down here and let's put some non-void methods. Okay, first method I'm going to create is a method for a person's full name. So I really just want to take the first name and concatenate it with the last name. Okay, so I want a method called full name, and it will yield a string. So my string is going to be my output type. Okay, so public, string. Okay, so it's no longer void. It's actually going to print out, it's actually going to produce a string. And I'm going to call this full name. Okay, and again, I don't need any parameters for this because I'm just going to use the first and last name. Let me get rid of that space. The first and last name instance variables for all my objects. Okay, so let me scroll down. So all I really want to do is first name plus, and of course I have to do a space, plus last name. Okay, now the only thing I have to add to this is the return keyword. Okay, so this is telling it to return whatever's after it as the string. Okay, if this was an int, I would return an int, and we'll do one of those. Okay, so all this is going to do is take the first and last name and put it together. Okay, and it'll return it as a string. We can assign that to a variable, or we can just print it. Okay, let me compile, and then we'll come over here and we'll just print a couple of them. Okay, well, let's do both. We'll do a couple. So I'm going to create a new string, and I'm going to say student1 full name, and I'm just going to take student1 and I'm going to run the full name method. Okay, so it'll take student1, Barb Millicent, and it'll take the first name and last name, and it'll write Barb space Millicent. Okay, and it assigns it. I've just assigned it to this new variable, student1 full name, and it's a string. So now I can print that. Whoops. So now if I just print student1 full name as far as this variable, all I should see is Barb space Millicent. Okay, let's run it. And there it is. Okay, I could, let's print a couple more. I'm not going to create variables. Let's just print. So now, let's do Mary Johnson. So now I'm going to take student 6 and I'm going to run the full name method. I could spell name correctly. That would be good. Okay, and then I got to close the parentheses. Oops. So these parentheses right here are the parentheses, the parameter parentheses for the method. Of course, there's no parameters. This parenthesis closes the string or the system out println section for my system out println. Okay, so I didn't save this as a variable. I could have called this student6 full name variable, but I'm just kind of trying to save a little bit of time here. Okay, so I should see Barb Millicent and then Mary Johnson, and there we go. Okay. All right, let's create another method, non-void method. Let me see what I have in my notes. Let's create a Boolean method. Let's create a method that's going to yield either true or false if a person's GPA is greater than or equal to 3.0. Okay, so public. Now I'm going to it's going to result in a Boolean, and we're going to say GPA above 3. Okay, and again, I don't need a parameter for this because I'm just going to use the GPA variable. Okay, So I want a true or false. Now I'm going to use a Boolean here. We haven't really talked about all this, but you'll understand it. So if the GPA, let me verify my variable name. I'm going to use this GPA from the instance variable. So if GPA is greater than or equal to 3.0, so GPA is greater than or equal to 3.0, it should return, if that's true, it'll return true. If that's false, it'll return false. So of course I do need return. I always like to put these in parentheses. I don't know why. I just think it looks a little nicer. Okay, so it'll run this Boolean. It'll say, is the GPA greater than 3.0 for whatever student I run it against? And if it is, it'll return true. If it's false, it'll return false. Okay, so GPA above 3. All right, let me compile. And what did I miss? My colon, of course. Silly. There we go. Or semicolon. Okay, so let's see. Barb does not have a GPA, so if I run it on student 1, it should be false. And if I run it on student 2 from Mike Jones, it should be true. So I could assign it to a Boolean variable. I'm just going to go ahead and run it and print it if that's okay to save some time. Okay, so if I do it to student 1, what was it? GPA above 3? The name of the method. Okay, and then if I run it again on student 2, because Mike Jones does have a GPA above GPA 3, this should print out false because student 1's GPA is not above 3, and this should print out true because student 2's GPA is above 3. Okay. And there we go. Okay. So there's my false. Scroll down a little bit. There's my false and my true. Okay. And again, I could have assigned this to a Boolean variable called student1, GPA or whatever, GPA greater than 3, or, you could name the variable anything. Or I can just go ahead and run it and print it right in the printout line, which again, I'm just trying to do to make this go a little faster. Okay. All right. I do want to do one more because none of these have parameters. Okay. I want to do one more that's going to use a parameter. I want to test if the GPA is between a certain range. So my parameter is going to be the range. Okay. So public, I'm going to skip the output type for a second. Okay. So I'm going to call this GPA in range. Now I'm going to specify the range. Now GPAs are doubles, so I assume the range has to be double. So I'm going to have a lower range and then an upper range. Okay. I'm going to do an if statement here. Okay. And again, this is a little bit beyond what we're doing right now, but I'll talk you through it and don't worry about it yet. We'll get to it. Okay. So if, again, the GPA and this GPA is coming from the instance variable GPA, because it's going to look at the GPA of whatever object I'm running this method on. So if GPA is, let's see, greater than the upper range, or, wrong one, or if GPA is less than the lower range, okay, I want to return something, okay. If it's not, then I'm going to return something else. Okay. So if it's outside the range, it's not in the range. Okay. So we can figure out what we're going to return. Should we return a false? Then I would make this Boolean, and this would be a true. Should I return a string statement saying, I don't know, yes and no, and I would make this a string. Okay, well, I already did a Boolean and a string, so I kind of wanted to did a Boolean and a string, so I kind of wanted to do something different. I want to do an int, just so you can see it. Where's my space here? Okay, so what integer should we return? It really doesn't matter, anything you want. A lot of times, so if the GPA is outside the range, it's greater than the upper range or lower or less than the lower range, it's not in the range. So we're gonna return a -1. Okay, I'll end my semicolon. And if it's inside the range, if it's not greater than or less than the lower and the upper, then I'm going to return a 1. Okay. And again, I could have returned anything. I could have made these strings and I would have made that string. I could have made these true and false and changed that to Boolean. I just wanted to do int just to do something different. Okay. I think I need to close my method. There we go, because I knew I had the open bracket there. I know I needed a closed bracket. Okay, so now let's test our GPA in the range. Now, this time when we run our method against our student, we got to do a lower and upper range. Okay, let me compile, make sure there's no mistakes in here. Oh, did I have an extra? I must have finished that and didn't realize I had already done that. Okay, all right, let's come over here. All right, so let's see. And again, let's do student 1. So student 1, what's it called? GPA in range. And let's do our upper. So I want to know if the student's GPA is between 2.0 and 3.0. So 2.0 will become my lower range and 3.0 will become my upper range because that's the order of the parameters. Okay. Now this should yield a 1 because it is in the range. 2.7 isn't less than that or greater than that. Okay, so this should yield me a 1. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I could assign this to a variable. We'll do the first one. We'll assign this to a variable. Student 1 GPA 2, 2, 3. Okay, so I'll assign that to a variable. Let me put my semicolon, and then I'm going to print that variable. I'm going to cheat a little bit, copy and paste this because, okay, so when I run this, it should yield me a 1, okay, because the GPA for student 1, the 2.7, was not less than 2 or greater than 3, okay, so it was in the range. Now let's do something for student 2. Let's see if student 2, the GPA is in the same range. Now, of course, it's not. It's outside, so it should result in a -1. And I'm going to do this all in a print statement, again, just to save time. So this time I'm going to do this whole thing. I'm just going to change it to run on student 2. So is student 2's GPA in range, there's my method name, between 2.0 and 3.0? Well, it isn't. It is greater, okay? So this should yield me a -1, okay, because it's not in the range. Their GPA is not in the range, okay? And again, don't worry about that if statement yet. What did I forget? Oh, close my parentheses because those are the parentheses for the parameters. I've got to close my parenthesis for my println statement, okay? Like I said, okay, so there we go. There's my -1. So again, I just wanted you to see a non-void method with parameters, okay? These were non-void methods without parameters, nothing in the parentheses. So don't worry about the if statement. We'll get to that eventually, but I needed to work with something here. Okay. All right, so now we have seen pretty much a lot of parts of our class. Before I disconnect, let's just talk about it real quick. We have our class name, we have our instance variables, okay? And again, we will create classes when we get to Unit 5. We have our constructors. We have 1, 2, 3 constructors, 3 different ways that we can create objects or instances of our classes. We've got void methods that simply perform a task, okay? They didn't yield anything that could be used as a variable, okay? And then we had some non-void methods that actually did yield something else. Okay, this method yielded a string, this method yielded a Boolean true or false, and then this final method yielded an int. So I can create variables off of those non-void methods. And then of course down at the bottom, we had our public string to string, which again, now you can see that is a non-void method because it actually returns a string value, okay? We don't actually type in stu1.toString. We could. This is a special method that allows us to print our objects. So that's why when we printed our objects, for example, I'll do it real quick. Let's do student1. It runs that public string to string method, even though it doesn't say stu.1 dot to string. I could type that. I could write that if I wanted to, but we don't need to. That was a special method, but we will see that a lot. Okay. All right. So there's our little introduction to classes and instances of classes, and we will dive deeper into this when we get to Unit 5. Okie dokie. See you next time.